The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which advisement to extend their remarks and include extraneous material on H.R. 5706.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, at this point, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the congressional record a letter from Chairman Nadler, the House Committee on Judiciary, agreeing to waive consideration of H.R. 5706, as well as my response to Mr. Nadler, expressing appreciation for his willingness to work cooperatively on this legislation.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 5706, the Stop Sexual Assault and Harassment in Transportation Act. The #1 goal in the transportation of people, whether it's across town or across an ocean, must be safety. No matter how much progress we've made in increasing the safety of our transportation system, we always must strive to do better. But we've seen over the course of the last several years, much more work remains to be done. And unfortunately, the pandemic has only served to exacerbate the problem. For instance, there were more than 5,700 reports of air rage incidents on U.S. airlines in 2021, compared to a typical year of 100 to 150 cases. And many of these incidents included sexual assault and harassment. In fact, last August, a passenger was arrested for punching a Frontier Airlines flight attendant and groping 2 others on a flight from Philadelphia to Miami. On another flight from New York to San Francisco last year, a plane was diverted when a passenger engaged in erratic behavior, including sexually harassing another passenger. The risk of unwelcoming and even threatening environment has never been more real for both passengers and transportation workers alike. And this existed long before the pandemic. According to a 2018 study, 68% of flight attendants on U.S. airlines say they experienced sexual harassment, and 18% experienced some type of physical sexual abuse from passengers during their careers. 68% sexual harassment, 18% physical sexual abuse. Moreover, this type of misconduct is not just limited to aviation. For example, sexual assault is by far most frequently reported crime on cruise ships. 101 incidents reported in 2019, the last full year before the pandemic shut down much of the industry's operations. And while we don't have a comprehensive set of data for public transit, a March 2020 survey of students at San Jose State University found that 63% of respondents had experienced some form of harassment while using transit. In recent years, there may be no other industry this issue has plagued more than transportation network companies. In 2019, Uber released its first ever report documenting sexual assaults among users of its ride-sharing app. The country documented over 6,000 reports of sexual assault incidents in a 2-year span. That's an average of almost 10 sexual assaults on an Uber or in an Uber per day. And just last October, Lyft released its first ever report documenting 4,158 sexual assault incidents over a span of 3 years. These results highlight the need for the federal government to do much more to root out the scourge of sexual assault in our transportation system. But we can't effectively respond to these incidents until we fully understand the scope of the problem. Unfortunately, there's no federal clearinghouse for transportation-related sexual assault and harassment incidents. The data that the Department of Justice and the Department of Transportation collect on sexual assault and harassment in transportation are largely of incidents that were directly reported to them, not from transportation providers. This information gap leaves lawmakers, policymakers, and transportation providers themselves unaware of areas where laws and policies should be improved. That's why the Committee on Transportation Infrastructure passed my bill, the H.R. 5706, Stop Sexual Assault and Harassment Transportation Act. This bill will require transportation providers to establish formal policies addressing sexual assault and harassment, direct employees to receive specific training for not just how to handle sexual assault or harassment incidents, but also how to recognize and respond to potential human trafficking activities. Direct the Department of Transportation to establish the first ever federal clearinghouse for transportation-related sexual assaults and harassment data to allow us and the traveling public to fully understand the scope of this problem. We can no longer allow sexual violence and abuse to persist on our roads, our waters, or in our skies. We must ensure our transportation system is safe for those who work in it and those who wish to use it. This bill, which will allow us to finally track, respond to, and ultimately prevent sexual assault and harassment within all areas of our transportation system, brings us one step closer to attaining that goal. I want to acknowledge and express my appreciation for the many supporters of this bill. In particular, the bill has been strongly endorsed by the Airline Pilots Association, the American Association of Justice, the Association of Flight Attendants, Association of Professional Flight Attendants, National Center on Sexual Exploitation, Rights for Girls, Survivors for Solutions, Transportation Communications Union, Transportation Trades Department, AFL-CIO, and Transport Workers Union of America. I'd also like to thank my Republican colleagues for their help in strengthening this bill by expanding its requirements to state-regulated for-profit vehicles. I urge my colleagues to support this measure, and I reserve the balance of my time.